The starship Elysium drifted silently through the void, its sleek hull reflecting the faint light of a distant sun. On board, the crew of 40 humans and 24 alien diplomats prepared for the final leg of their journey to the Galactic Summit. Among them was Princess Lira of the Zynari, a species known for their ethereal beauty and telepathic abilities. But Lira was different. She was blind, a rare condition among her kind, and her telepathy was weak, barely strong enough to sense emotions. To her people, she was a disappointment, a flawed heir to the throne. To the rest of the galaxy, she was an oddity, a curiosity to be pitied or ignored. Lira stood alone in the observation deck, her milky white eyes fixed on the stars she could not see. Her long silver hair shimmered like starlight, and her delicate, translucent skin glowed faintly in the dim light. She wore a simple gown of iridescent fabric, a stark contrast to the ornate attire of the other diplomats. She had learned long ago that no amount of finery could make others see her as anything but broken. The door hissed open behind her, and she tensed. She could sense the presence of someone entering, a human, judging by the faint emotional aura. Humans were still new to the galactic stage, their emotions raw and unfiltered compared to the more reserved species. This one felt curious, not pitying, not dismissive, just curious. "Princess Lira?" a voice asked, soft and respectful. It was a man's voice, warm and tinged with an accent she couldn't place. "Yes," she replied, turning toward the sound. "Who are you?" "Captain Elias Grant," he said, stepping closer. "I'm the human liaison for this mission. I wanted to introduce myself and, well, make sure you're comfortable." Lira tilted her head, her expression unreadable. "Comfortable? Why wouldn't I be?" Elias hesitated. "I've heard some of the others. Well, they haven't been kind. I thought you might like someone to talk to." She felt a flicker of surprise. No one had ever sought her out simply to talk. "You're not afraid of me?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Afraid?" Elias chuckled. "Why would I be afraid of you?" "Because I'm blind. Because I'm different." Elias stepped closer, his presence steady and reassuring. "Princess, where I come from, being different isn't something to fear, something to celebrate. And as for your blindness, well, I've met plenty of people who can see but are blind to what really matters. You're not broken, Lira. You're just you." For the first time in her life, Lira felt a spark of hope. She reached out tentatively, her slender fingers brushing against Elias's arm. He didn't pull away. "Thank you," she said softly. "No one has ever spoken to me like that." Elias smiled, though she couldn't see it. "Then it's about time someone did." Over the next few days, Elias and Lira spent hours together. He described the stars to her, painting vivid pictures with his words. She, in turn, shared stories of her people, their history, and their struggles. She told him of the loneliness she had endured, the rejection she had faced. Elias listened, his empathy unwavering. One evening, as they sat in the observation deck, Lira asked, "Why are you so kind to me, Elias? What do you see in me that no one else does?" Elias was silent for a moment, then said, "I see strength. I see someone who's endured more than most could imagine and still carries herself with grace. I see a friend." Lira's heart swelled with emotion. She had never had a friend before. "Elias," she said, her voice trembling, "I don't know how to thank you." "You don't have to," he replied. "Just keep being you." As the Elysium approached the Galactic Summit, tensions began to rise. The Zynari delegation, led by Lira's uncle, made it clear that she was not to speak during the proceedings. She was to remain silent, a symbol of her people's weakness. Lira accepted this with quiet resignation, but Elias could see the pain in her eyes. On the first day of the summit, Lira sat at the edge of the Zynari delegation, her head bowed. The other species ignored her, their attention focused on the more influential members of her family. But Elias, seated with the human delegation, kept his eyes on her. He could feel her sadness, her frustration. When the time came for the Zynari to present their case for increased aid, Lira's uncle stood and began to speak. His words were cold and calculated, devoid of the compassion Lira had always believed her people should embody. She clenched her fists, her heart aching. Suddenly Elias stood. "Excuse me," he said, his voice cutting through the chamber. "But I believe Princess Lira has something to say." The room fell silent. Lira's uncle glared at Elias, but the human captain held his ground. "Let her speak," Elias said firmly. "She is the future of her people, and her voice deserves to be heard." Lira's heart raced. She could feel the eyes of the entire chamber on her, their emotions a chaotic storm. But then she felt Elias's presence, steady and unwavering. He believed in her, and for the first time she believed in herself. She stood, her voice clear and strong. "My people are suffering," she began. "But not just from the lack of resources. We are suffering because we have forgotten what it means to be Zynari. We have forgotten compassion, empathy, and unity. If we are to survive, we must remember these things. We must remember who we are." The chamber was silent as Lira spoke, her words resonating with a power she had never known she possessed. When she finished, the room erupted into applause. Even her uncle, though reluctant, nodded in acknowledgement. After the summit, Lira returned to the Elysium with Elias. As they stood in the observation deck, she turned to him and said, "You changed everything for me, Elias. I don't know how to repay you." Elias smiled. "You don't have to repay me, Lira. Just promise me one thing. Anything. Promise me you'll never let anyone make you feel like you're less than you are. You're a princess, Lira. And not just of the Zynari. You're a princess of the stars." Tears welled in Lira's sightless eyes as she reached out and took Elias's hand. "I promise," she whispered. And as the Elysium sailed through the cosmos, Lira knew that she had finally found her place in the universe. Not as a flawed heir, but as a leader, a friend, and a beacon of hope. And it was all thanks to the one human who had seen her for who she truly was.